Hey you guys, welcome back. This week, kind of different setting, but I wanted to talk to you guys about healing. I know a lot of people are going through really difficult situations, and let's just be honest, whether or not you want to admit this, everyone is healing from something, whether they are consciously trying to heal from it or whether or not they're just suppressing it and completely ignoring it. Everyone has something. So in this video, I want to give you some signs that you're still unhealed. And before we even dive into any of this, please understand that healing is not a straight line. It is not I'm just going to do this one thing and then I'm going to be over it. It is messy. It is all over the place. It is up and down. It is an emotional roller coaster. So please do not judge yourself if you are still trying to overcome something that has been probably kind of living in you for a really long time. When we talk about wounds and being unhealed, you have to remember that you've gone through a lot of different experiences. And I'm sure maybe some of you can sit there and understand what specifically you've been through that has caused whatever the wound is. So if you have an abandonment wound, maybe you understand exactly why or where that came from. But a lot of people have a lot of different wounds. And when I talk about this kind of stuff in my course, 9 Weeks to Emotionally Healing, I'll link that down below. I go over every type of emotional wound that you can have. And I even dive into how you actually even got this wound, the different types of experiences that you've gone through that could have led to you actually having this wound. Now, the problem is that most people go through life and they're completely oblivious as to the traumatic events that they go through and just how they could actually impact them. Let's go through the first sign that you are unhealed. Now, when you are unhealed, and I just want to say this too, is that we go through a multitude of experiences in life. We go through a lot of different situations that could lead to us carrying around some baggage. And so you might be able to know exactly where this wound came from and why you feel this anger, this sadness, or any of these signs. But what I want you to start really realizing is, what are you doing day to day that's like keeping this momentum going, this habit going? What are you not doing that is actually hurting yourself from moving forward? The first thing is you find it difficult to let go of those emotions. So whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's resentment, whatever it is that's going on inside of you, a lot of people have a real hard time with letting go. And letting go is not a one-time thing. It is something that you will do over and over again until you've kind of freed yourself from the experience. Now, again, remember is that if 5 years later you feel like you've done all the work and you're in a great space, and then 5 years later, all of a sudden you're kind of like revisiting some of the anger, some of the sadness, whatever it is, that just means that there's more that's coming up that still needs to be healed. You are not going to always be able to heal everything when it's happening or even like right after it's happening. There might be years later and all of a sudden remnants of an experience that you've gone through, PTSD, whatever it is, could come up for you. And unfortunately, that's just part of being human. It's a part of the human experience and it's part of healing. The next thing is you could still struggle with intrusive thoughts. You could still struggle with flashbacks. You could still struggle with dreaming about what has happened to you or a person. And of course, all of this just leads to a lot of stress and anxiety. Now let's just stop right there. So right off the bat, we have probably two of the most difficult things. We have intrusive thoughts and we have just the emotion and the feelings that you feel regarding some of the experiences that you've been through. Those two things are not easy things to deal with, and they are 100% going to take time. Now, if your feelings are anger and resentment, those are actually, and some people may disagree with this, those are a little easier to deal with than sadness. Sadness, you just have to sit in and feel, and you kind of have to do that over and over again until it starts coming out of you or you're a little bit more lighter because you've released everything. And really, anger and sadness is just a mask, anger and resentment are just a mask for sadness. And the sadness is the disappointment that you feel. So when we don't kind of sit in the disappointment and we don't sit in the sadness, then we're just masking it with anger and we're never really actually getting to the root of what it is that we're really feeling. We think we feel resentment, we think we feel anger, but in fact, we're not. It really is just the uncomfortable feelings of sadness that most people never want to even touch. It's easier to sit in anger and resentment than it is to actually sit in how you really feel. And of course, the intrusive thoughts and the flashbacks are just your mind's way of saying, hey, let's go back there, let's go back there. And sometimes, even though we don't want to admit this, it's actually good to go back there because you're unleashing what still needs to be kind of dug up and dealt with. People will really struggle with this because maybe too much time has passed and you don't want to go back there. It was uncomfortable to go back there or deal with it to begin with, and you don't want to go back there and deal with anything else, so you start to suppress it. And of course, we know the more that you suppress it, it's just going to grow and it's going to turn into something it doesn't need to turn into. So the more you can deal with these flashbacks and saying, okay, the flashbacks and the intrusive thoughts that I'm having, this is just my mind, my body, my soul's way of saying, hey, look, you really need to deal with this. What is it that you have to deal with and feel right now that'll help us to keep us moving forward and be in good spirits and be in a better, healthy state? The next thing is you try to avoid that situation or that traumatic experience or that person. So any kind of avoidant behavior just basically says, I'm going to keep suppressing this and I'm not going to actually deal with it, and I'm not going to push myself to grow, to be uncomfortable, to face the sadness, to face me being scared, to face any of the anger. You're just going to try to constantly avoid what it is that you're really feeling. The next thing is you will struggle with trusting people. And this is basically where we say that even though you had nothing to do with my past, I'm going to put a little bit of a wall up. Now, putting a wall up in a healthy way is different than putting a wall up to not want to let myself to feel or to experience vulnerability. You will also struggle with relationship issues. So either you are going to be really too independent, I'm self-sufficient, and sometimes people call this self-love, but it's actually not. It's just an avoidant way of not dealing with or not being vulnerable and learning how to be vulnerable. So most people think that they're being self-loving, that I can depend on myself and all of those things. But the reality is that they struggle with letting people in, or the opposite would be that they're too dependent on people. And this is where they basically haven't healed from codependency and don't even realize that they are actually being codependent. The interesting thing is that when we have unresolved issues, we don't realize just how much it actually affects us physically. So when we have whether it's gut issues or digestive problems or sleep problems, or we're not able to really handle stress in somewhat of a good way, we don't have good strategies and skills, we don't have a healthy lifestyle. And I don't mean just working out and eating right. I'm also talking about your mental lifestyle. When you're actively not practicing those things, then it really, what it boils down to is you're just suppressing what's there that you haven't dealt with. When you haven't dealt with what's going on underneath the surface, and remember, like I said in the beginning, this stuff is not okay, I'm going to deal with this once. I'm going to have a therapy session and then I'm going to be done with it. I'm going to cry. I'm going to feel everything. And then, okay, we're going to move forward. It is constantly, not constantly, I don't want to say that, but it is a practice of being super aware of how you feel. This is why I always talk about self-parenting, because it will help you in so many areas of life, is to be able to slow down, to really start taking care of yourself and giving yourself emotionally and mentally, not just physically and spiritually, what it is that you need in every single moment. The more you can do that, then you get to a place where you actually have solid, healthy self-love, stuff that is real concrete and not just words that you're saying and, you trying to be independent, or you just being avoidant in general and thinking that you've healed when there's still remnants of that experience still living inside of you. And it's okay to think that you've healed from something and realize, okay, maybe I'm not fully there yet. If you're watching this video, then chances are you're probably not going to be struggling with this, but emotional numbing, I think a lot of people just are numb to what they feel. why they feel what they feel. They're not really inquisitive. And if you're watching this video, then I would just bet that you are on a journey of self-discovery, that you are actively working on yourself, and you're really trying to learn how to do these things for yourself. So you're probably not numbing everything. You may avoid things here and there just because you get preoccupied with life, or maybe you just don't want to go there in general, but numbing is something completely different. This is where someone just has an inability to actually feel. Again, this one I think you're probably not going to struggle with either, and really it's just not having closure. I think when you really are hung up on the closure and you haven't talked to anyone about the experiences that you've been through and you haven't learned what actually closure is, then it's going to just haunt you. And either you're going to just have your ego at the forefront, you're going to want that closure, you're going to want that conversation, you're going to want that apology, or you are going to just suppress it so much that you don't realize how suppressing that emotional wound is actually affecting you. I think guilt and blame are two really big ones that a lot of people struggle with. They blame themselves for not doing something different. They wish that they would have known something different and could have handled themselves in a different way. And when you don't know any different and you're just trying to survive, you can't really blame yourself. You have to learn how to forgive yourself for, I don't want to even say past mistakes, but just for not knowing what you know now, and that you're human and you're going through a human experience and it's messy. It's not a straight line. And as much as we want to always do everything right and handle every situation perfectly well and never experience any amount of pain, it's just not reality. So learning how to let go, not just of the experience, but also of everything that you've kind of put on you that makes you at fault for what it is that you went through. When you're still struggling with not being able to handle the stress of that experience, whether you're experiencing a lot of massive anxiety or panic attacks or anything that kind of looks like that, it basically is the stress and the weight of that experience that you've gone through. And this is really where you start experiencing PTSD. And PTSD is a real thing. Now, the point of this video was to give you insight on some of the things that you perhaps are struggling with and trying to figure out ways, and it's always going to start with self-parenting. It's always going to start with the mind of what am I doing that's actually hurting myself, and what could I be doing better at that could help myself to move myself forward. So whether you were struggling with one of these things or every single one, just start to break down, am I struggling with this, and what am I doing right now that's hurting me, that's causing this thing to kind of stay. So if you're struggling with anxiety or panic, you won't be able to go there until you start working on kind of number 1 and number 2, where we work on the intrusive thoughts, where we work on just the pent up feelings that are still kind of living inside of you, and understanding how to actually heal and move yourself forward. So I hope that this kind of gave you a little bit of insight and gave you some signs as to the things that you could be doing better that will help you to not only just heal, but just start taking one day at a time just to help yourself move yourself forward. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and share, and I will see you in my next one. Take care.